In elementary school, you're taught that every piece of writing should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. In middle school, when you write your first essays, you're taught to write an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. But beyond that, your understanding of how to effectively organize a piece of writing is left largely up to you and whatever you can intuit from the various texts we read. But the way in which ideas are arranged in a text is far too important a subject not to study specifically. And so that's what we're going to study in this lesson. Let's begin with some notes. If you take away nothing else from this lesson, take this away, that the order of ideas matters. I know that to a lot of you that seems to go without saying, but it's an important thing to keep in mind throughout this lesson and throughout the remainder of our year as we continue to refine our writing process. The order of ideas matters in a piece of writing. See, effective writing arranges ideas to meet an audience's needs. That's really the biggest leap that we need you to make as a high school writer going into college, is that you're no longer writing for an assignment, you have to write to meet the needs of an audience. Yeah, since the purpose of any text is to affect an audience in some way, through making them think some way or feel some way or experience something. Because of that, we have to consider the ways in which our audience will process those ideas and feelings and experiences. And we need to tailor the organization or arrangement of our ideas to facilitate that understanding. But before we go any further, let's go ahead and pause the video to complete this short reflection. Reflect on this question you're given in just a paragraph. Make sure you write informally and off the top of your head. And when you've finished your reflection, go ahead and unpause the video to continue the lesson. Let's continue our notes. When you're first taught to write essays, you're taught this three-part model. Start your essay with an introduction that introduces your topic and thesis. Then continue with your body, which is the majority of your essay, that presents your argument or analysis or whatever you're writing about. And then finish up with your conclusion, which reiterates your thesis, sums up your argument, and does something to end. This model loosely meets your audience's needs. The audience definitely needs to be introduced to a topic before you can discuss it in depth. Your audience definitely expects to have a thesis statement because you're writing to an academic audience, so we expect to see that thesis within that introduction. But after that, it's just a matter of laying down all of your ideas until you're out of those ideas. Yeah, the body and the conclusion, we just kind of lay down in whatever order that we can until we run out of ideas. In order to more effectively arrange a text, we need a more strategic approach, one that more carefully considers our audience's needs. Here then is going to be our arrangement prime directive, so to speak, the principle that we're going to guide all of our organization techniques and strategies off of. Your ideas must be arranged in such a way that if someone rearranged the main ideas of each paragraph, your discussion would lose some of its meaning and/or effect. In other words, I shouldn't be able to put your essay or even just the body of your essay into a blender, hit puree, and then pour out an essay that reads much the same way as before. I shouldn't be able to do that because it should be arranged in such a purposeful way that no one should be able to mess with that arrangement without losing something significant. A quick note here before we look at this more complex pattern of arrangement. In order to design a pattern of arrangement that meets an audience's needs, it may help to break up any text you're writing into a series of stages to work through or goals to achieve rather than just a series of parts to put together. Parts to put together implies a certain level of interchangeability. And if you write an essay correctly, those parts should not be at all interchangeable. And so I prefer to put the word parts aside. You're not writing a series of parts. You're working through a series of stages. You're achieving a series of goals that get you from point A to point Z with your audience. Here then are the general stages that we're going to use to conceptualize how an essay ought to be organized or arranged. So generally, any essay you write should work through these stages or goals, and they should go in this order. 1, engage the audience. 2, prime the audience for your discussion. 3, guide the audience through your reasoning. 4, lead the audience to your conclusion. And 5, make the audience care. Let's look now at each stage individually, starting with stage 1, engaging the audience. That means provoking interest in the audience or provoking their curiosity at what you have to say. We often call the beginning of an essay the hook, and that's because we're trying to hook the audience in. Here we also need to introduce the topic. That's another way to engage them. And finally, stating our position, giving that thesis. That's another way to engage them, because a well-worded thesis should prompt the audience to wonder, how is that possible, or why is that necessarily true? Stage 2, priming the audience for your discussion. This means to establish whatever common understandings are necessary in order for your audience to grasp the arguments that you need to make in the rest of your body. Okay, so providing any background information that the audience needs to know. Finding any common ground if the issue is particularly contentious. Narrowing the scope of your discussion, saying that I'm not talking about this necessarily, but really just about this. Or coming to terms, meaning defining what it is that you're actually talking about in your argument. These are all things that can help prime your audience, get them ready to hear your actual lines of reasoning. Stage 3, guiding the audience through your reasoning, is exactly what it sounds like. Systematically working through that argument or an analysis. Making point A, then using point A to make point B, and then using point B or points A and B to make point C, and so on and so forth. Here you want to keep in mind some of the techniques that you perhaps picked up writing that Socratic dialogue, how the Socrates character systematically works through that line of reasoning to go from point A to the end. Stage 4, leading the audience to your conclusion. This is really just the end of stage 3, where you put all of your argument or analysis steps together and come to that final conclusion. It should be the climax of your essay, what the whole essay has kind of been working toward, that zenith of the pyramid you've been constructing block by block. And lastly, we have stage 5, making the audience care. Specifically, making them care about the conclusion that you've just drawn them to, giving your discussion some greater meaning, making it important, sending your audience away forever changed by having read what you've written, pushing your ideas out into the world. It can be something forceful, like a call to action, or something subtle, like merely inviting your audience to dwell on the conclusions that you've drawn here. Now, these stages or goals do not divide up the work of writing an essay evenly, okay? They don't even line perfectly up with paragraphs. For instance, this, although it's 5 stages, this is not necessarily a formula for a 5-paragraph essay, okay? Engaging the audience, for instance, should be a relatively short stage, something that you don't spend a whole lot of time doing in your essay. 1 paragraph in a short essay, 2 or 3 in a really long essay, but relatively speaking, it should be fairly short, between 5 and 10% of your essay. The next step, priming the audience for your discussion, that's likely going to take more of your text than engaging them, although still less than stage 3. Guiding the audience through your reasoning, that's the big stage that should take up the majority of your essay and should be made up of multiple smaller stages and goals. First, I need my audience to be convinced of this. Then with that, I can convince them of this. And if I can convince them of this thing, and so on. The natural endpoint, I said before, is stage 4, leading that audience through your line of reasoning and to a conclusion. That's kind of the end, again, of stage 3. And then finally, making the audience care. That should also be relatively short because you've already concluded what you set out to conclude. Now you don't need too much more to really make the idea important. That is, if you've done all the hard work of making the idea convincing in the first place. So again, we're just talking about another maybe single paragraph in a short essay for that last stage. Okay, let's go ahead and pause the video at this time to complete the first exercise. Here you're asked to practice analyzing the arrangement of a text by analyzing how each paragraph is situated within the text as a whole. When you're finished working through this exercise, make sure you click on the link that's been provided in the notes document there to check my sample responses. Usually I go over these in the video, but it's really too long to go over verbally. It'd make the video just way too long. So check my responses document on your own. Check my responses against what you wrote, see if they're similar, and please contact me with any questions that you have. Go ahead and pause the video again to complete this next exercise where you're going to apply your paragraph analysis that you just completed to the 5 stages that we've covered in this lesson for essay writing. You're going to be explaining how the essay works through each stage just in 1 or 2 complete sentences. And once again, when you're finished, just click on the link provided to check your responses against the sample responses I've provided. When you finished up with this exercise, go ahead and unpause to watch the final part of the video. After you've completed both exercises and checked your responses against mine, go ahead and complete the practice activities. Yes, 2 practice activities for this lesson. The first one asks you to analyze the arrangement of another essay by reverse engineering an outline of what that author's outline might have looked like before they wrote the essay. Then after that, you're going to extend your learning by analyzing the order in which a persuasive text employs a series of rhetorical techniques, because the order of rhetoric also matters, not just the order of ideas. When you've finished up with both practice activities, you're finished with the lesson.